Hello, my fellow YouTuber and person who is interested in hang gliding. Welcome to Gone Gliding. My name is Jason, and this is video number 5 in a 5-part series of videos to help you prepare for the Hang 2 written test that is administered by the United States Hang Gliding and Paragliding Association, or USHPA. If you happen to be jumping in this series of videos at video 2, 3, 4, or 5, go back to video 1 and watch these chronologically because I think that it will help you. Although I guess you could skip around these if you need to. Anyway, I would love some feedback. Please feel free to subscribe to my channel. It really helps out the channel and growing and just spreading the message about hang gliding and hopefully getting more people interested in this sport. Leave a comment, give me that thumbs up button. The support just really helps the channel overall and supports the sport of hang gliding. Thanks for watching and good luck on your Hang 2 test. Can't wait for you to pass so that you can come fly with me. All right, hey everybody, welcome to the 5th and final video in this series to help you work on and train for and prepare for your Hang 2 written test. If you've stuck through all these videos, congratulations. I think it's going to help you out tremendously. And again, I wish you the best of luck as you prepare for and take your test. Hopefully you pass on the first try. A few things that I just want to say, and this applies to every video in this series, but you guys should know this, but in case you don't, I am not an instructor, okay? I don't work for, nor am I endorsed by USHPA in any way. And same applies to the FAA or any other flight or aviation organization that exists. I am simply just a guy with a YouTube that wants to help fellow pilots get to their Hang 2 rating, learn some foundational information about hang gliding, and obviously, you know, pass the test if you're going to be taking the Hang 2 test through USHPA. I'm sure a lot of this probably applies to organizations in other countries as well. So if you do happen to be watching from somewhere else, would love to hear your feedback and comments and see how applicable this is for the test that you have to take as well. Obviously, I don't know everything and I might even get some things wrong. That usually happens. And so if that does happen and you happen to notice whatever mistake I made or incorrect information I gave, please leave a comment. Please leave references to, you know, why it's wrong and where the correct answer would be coming from. Would greatly appreciate that kind of feedback. Today, I'm going to be covering a lot of really fun stuff. This stuff is actually like exciting to me. I hope it is for you as well. But not everything that I'm talking about today comes from the book that I have referenced in videos 1 through 4. Some of it does, but today we are going to be diving a lot deeper into the federal aviation regulations known as FAR 103, which comes from the FAA. FAR 103 is what guides ultralights, so that includes your hang gliders, your paragliders, you know, ultralight powered flying machines. It also has like your powered paragliders, your trikes, which are like powered hang gliders. All of that type of stuff is under FAR 103 for aviation regulations in the United States. I highly recommend that you go to the website, the FAA website, and you read and get familiar with FAR 103. You will need to know some of this information for the test. Whatever we're reviewing today is only going to hit a little bit of those topics, and you need to be familiar with all of it. So make sure you familiarize yourself with FAR 103, as well as the Code of Federal Regulations, or CFRs, that are also referenced within FAR 103. And we will talk about that on some of the questions and answers in this video. Anyway, if you're new to my channel, welcome. I would love to have you subscribe. And if you are returning to my channel and in this series, coming back for all of them, welcome back. Either way, I would love to have you hit that thumbs up button to show your support and leave a comment. And other than that, let's kick off this final video and fill our brains with some amazing aviation information. All right, let's get this started. All right, everyone, here we go. We are starting on question number 44, which says, which of the below are 2 important warning signs that your hang glider is about to stall? Option A, variosync alarm is beeping. Option B, hang glider is sluggish to your roll inputs. Option C, you experience decreased base bar back pressure. Or option D, you experience increased base bar back pressure. All right, so there's two of them you need to choose. Think about how you would answer this on the Hang 2 test. Pause the video if you need extra time, and then come on back for the answer. Welcome back, everybody. The answer to question 44 is options B and D. All right, so hang glider is sluggish to your roll inputs, and you experience increased base bar back pressure. So let's check out page 50 in the book for the answer. All right, so we're gonna look right here in the top left of the page where it says stall speed. And let's just read through that so we understand everything relating to the principle of, how to answer this question on the test. So it says a glider's stall speed depends on its design and the weight of the pilot. And of course, that's very true. So you can have various weights of a pilot in different types of aircraft. You could have a double surface or single surface glider as a very simple example. Continuing, it says a good training glider will give the pilot plenty of warning before stalling. The first stage of the stall is mushing flight, where the glider is flying through the air with part of the wing stalled. The glider will respond sluggishly to the pilot's commands and mush down through the air at a steeper than normal angle. And of course, here's where our answer is going to come from. It says, remember the warning signs of a stall. Right there in the first one, the control bar will press against your hands. So that's where we see option D, where it says you experience increased base bar back pressure. That is exactly what it's saying here in the book. The control bar, the base bar, the speed bar, whatever you like to call it, will press against your hands. And the reason that it's going to be doing that is because as it enters that stall, the glider is going to want to try to go into a dive so that it can increase its speed. Okay, so it's trying to recover from the stall automatically, and that is going to make it go nose down, which puts the control bar back against your hands. All right. If we look down a little further on the page, it says the glider will feel sluggish and respond poorly. Okay, so that's our option B. The hang glider is sluggish to your roll inputs. So word for word, the glider will feel sluggish and it will respond poorly. Another warning sign of a stall here is it says the sound of the wind will be reduced and the breeze on your face will be lighter than normal. So that's another one that you might see as a potential option on the test. So just make sure that you're familiar with all of the warning signs of a stall. We have also covered that a lot already in some of the other question and answer scenarios in videos 1 through 4. So I don't want to hit too hard on the characteristics of a stall and what you might experience. These lay it out pretty clearly. So let's go ahead and head on to question number 45. All right, question number 45 says hang gliders and paragliders are classified by the FAA as an ultralight, and therefore the pilot and the glider they fly must adhere to Federal Aviation Regulations, FAR, Part 103. Is this true or false? Think about how you would answer that. If you need time, pause the video and then come back for the answer. And welcome back. All right, the answer to question 45 is A. This is true. And here on page 244 of the book, it doesn't give us the answer to this question verbatim, but it's certainly implied, and the answer is definitely true. We are classified as a hang glider or paraglider as an ultralight. And, here is the section in the center of page 244 talking about Federal Aviation Regulations. And like I said in the beginning of this video, you are going to want to get familiar with it. This is a very, very, very tiny section and explanation of what FAR 103 is. And I can promise you that on the test, you're going to need to understand more of the information as it is laid out in FAR 103. So do not skip over going to the website and reading and learning about FAR 103. It's really not that long to read, but it is in more detail than what you'll find here on the book. So these bullet points that you see on page 244 are a very simplified version of FAR 103, okay? So the answer is true, and we're going to be learning more about it. So for now, we're going to go on to question 46. All right, everyone, we're on question number 46 now, which says, which of the below answers properly lists the FAA regulation concerning paragliding, hang gliding, and ultralight flights over congested areas or over an assembly of people? Okay, so option A says no person may operate an ultralight vehicle over a congested area of a city, town, or settlement, or over any open air assembly of persons. Option B is no person may operate an ultralight vehicle over a congested area of a city, town, or settlement, or over any open air assembly of persons unless you have a radio and are in communication with air traffic control. Option C is no person may operate an ultralight vehicle over a congested area of a city, town, or settlement, or over any open air assembly of persons if flying below 1,000 feet above ground level. And option D says no person may operate an ultralight vehicle over a congested area of a city, town, or settlement, or over any open air assembly of persons if flying below 2,000 feet above ground level. All right, so think about how you would answer this on the test. Pause it if you need to, and then join us for the answer. And welcome back, everybody. All right, the answer to number 46 is option A. So you're just not allowed to do it at all. It doesn't matter how far you are above the ground or the sea level or whatever. And we are going to go check out our answer on page 244. Page 244 here in the book, in the yellow area on the right side of the page, it says you must not fly over any congested area of a town or city or above a crowd of people. So this is also coming from FAR 103.15. Okay, so let's just do a little Google search or whatever, and we're gonna go just type in FAA FAR 103 regulation. We'll click on that, and here we go. All right, and this is what we want right here. So we've got the Code of Federal Regulations, or CFR. You'll see that as well. But right here, it says Part 103, Ultralight Vehicles. There we go. We are now in FAR 103. And for the answer to the question that we just now reviewed, which we also found in the book, if we scroll down further, operations over congested areas, and it says right here, no person may operate an ultralight vehicle over any congested area of a city, town, or settlement, or over any open air assembly of persons. And you can see it doesn't mention anything about being above ground level, sea level, or anything like that at all. It doesn't say that you can have a permit or authorization to do it. It just says you can't do it. You know, you want to make sure that you don't fly your hang glider over the Super Bowl or over the World Series, or, you know, even if you're just like living out in a small rural town, if they've got a baseball game and the whole town is there attending the amazing high school game, you can't fly over that congested area of the town. It's not saying that you can't fly over a town or a city or a settlement, but you can't do it if there is an open air assembly of persons there, okay? So make sure you're familiar with FAR 103.15, operations over congested areas. All right, everyone, here we are at question 47, which we'll go ahead and read that first. It says, in many parts of the United States, especially east of the Mississippi River, hang gliding and paragliding above 1,200 feet AGL, or above ground level, is in FAA controlled airspace. All right, so let's just assume that you're an absolute genius with like an IQ of 180 and you have an extremely photographic memory, and you've memorized the entire book that we've been referencing through these videos. You're not going to find this answer, all right? So these next few questions, the next 3 or 4, are going to have to do with airspace. So, you know, airspace throughout all of the air at different altitudes, as well as the airspace surrounding airports, okay? And so before we can actually answer this question, we have to learn the material, right? And I highly recommend that you do not just watch my video here on this, but go like explore all of YouTube. There are a lot of really great videos out there on YouTube that teach about airspace, and some of them are specific to airplane pilots and helicopter pilots. And others are going to be more about your ultralights. And so they're geared towards hang gliders and paragliders and other ultralight aircraft. Go out and check those out as well. I should be giving you enough here in this video that it will help you on the Hang 2 test. And I'm going to go actually a little bit above and beyond that just because I really like this subject, but also because I want you guys to also find a passion for learning about the airspace. If you're ever going to be getting into cross-country flying, you're going to need to understand material that relates to airspace and airports, how to and where to find that information out on the interwebs. So let's go ahead and dive into airspace, and then we will come back to question 47 and then the next few as well that will be asking about, different things regarding airports, airspace, when and where you can fly, where you find this information and things like that. All right, let's go dive in. Okay, so what we're looking at here is a little slide that I made myself from information I have found all over the internet, as well as a lot of those great YouTube videos I referenced earlier. But basically, when we're thinking about airspace, there are 6 classifications. And you can either say A, B, C, D, E, G, or you can go by their military phonetic alphabet letters: Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, and Golf. Okay, so those are the 6 classifications of airspace according to the FAA. And then there are some little easy ways to try to remember what they are, which is that third column there. So for A, or alpha airspace, I write, or we call it above, okay, because it's above all other airspaces. B is Bravo, and some easy ways to think about it are big, busy, and bold blue. And I'll describe that bold blue here in a minute. For the Class C or Charlie airspace, we can refer to that as crowded. So that's a good, easy way to remember it. It's a large airport. It is big, but it is not big for Blue or Bravo, okay? And so it is different. A Class C airport is crowded. For D or Delta, I call that dashed blue. That's one easy way for me to remember how that looks on a sectional chart. But another way to refer to that is dialogue. I'm not a huge fan of dialogue because what they're saying is you have to talk to a controlled air tower to enter that airspace. But that's also true for Bravo and Charlie airspace. They all require dialogue. But potentially that helps because there are airports that don't have an air traffic control tower. Therefore, there's no dialogue. And then we move on to E airspace, which is echo, and we will call that everywhere else. And G or Gulf is ground, okay? And so the little bit of information here in the final column for A alpha, that is going to be your 18,000 feet at mean sea level and above. Okay, so in this airspace, ultralights are not allowed to fly outside of extremely rare permission that is granted before flying into that area, like if you're setting a record or something. The airspace for Alpha is 18,000 and above, and hang gliders, paragliders, powered paragliders, trikes, which are powered hang gliders, sailplanes, all of the ultralight aircraft are not allowed above 18,000 feet. Okay, so this is IFR only. IFR stands for Instrument Flight Rating or Rules, Instrument Flight Rules, and VFR is Visual Flight Rules. Okay, so VFR is prohibited at 18,000 and above, and in a hang glider, we're not flying with instrumentation that they would have in larger like commercial aircraft, military aircraft, all of that. Okay, so all aircraft must have an ATC or air traffic control clearance and a Mode C transponder to be in Class A airspace. Class B, the air traffic control clearance is required before entry into Class B airspace. This is going to be your big airports. That's why we call it big, B-I-G. Okay. Big airports are going to be like LaGuardia, SFO, San Francisco, LAX for Los Angeles, IAH or Houston International Airport. I think it's called George Bush Airport now. Like these are the largest size airports in the United States. Okay, are going to be all your Class B airports. You may have some that you might think are Class B, but they're actually Class C. And those are almost as busy. The classification simply comes down to how many instrument rated takeoff and landings they have at that airport. So that's kind of the differentiator there according to the FAA. Finishing up Class B here. So ATC clearance is required before entry. Mode C transponders are required. VFR and IFR are both allowed. In Class C airspace, two-way radio communication is required before entry. Mode C transponders are required. VFR and IFR are allowed. These are still quite large airports, so it's not like you're going to be like flying in and landing in the grass next to the runway here at a Charlie airport. For your Class D airspace and airports, two-way radio communication is required before entering these areas. There is no transponder requirement unless you're above a specific altitude, and both VFR and IFR are allowed. And then for your E airspace, IFR requires ATC clearance, so the air traffic controller has to give you clearance to approach an IFR. VFR does not need a clearance, but you have to maintain your minimum visibility in cloud clearance. And so cloud clearance is another important thing that you should know from FAR 103. As an ultralight free flight pilot, you need to know what the rules are for you in your hang glider or paraglider for cloud clearance and minimum visibility. And then for G or ground airspace, there is no ATC clearance required. It is VFR only. The minimum visibility and cloud clearance still apply, generally from the surface up to 1,200 feet AGL, but sometimes 700 feet AGL. So that should trigger something for you from question 47, which was asking us about these heights from the surface up to a certain AGL for G airspace, right? So we are going to deep dive into that just a little bit here more in a second. All right, and I just wanted to add a few extra of these. Are these called mnemonics? I don't even know if these are mnemonics or if they're just like easy ways to remember it based on the letters, but either way, there's a few additional words here that might help you if the ones I put in the last chart didn't really resonate with you. Maybe you like some of these better. So A is for altitude, right? Because it's really high. It's the highest level up there, level A. B is for big. C is for crowded. Those are the ones that I used on the last chart. D, they have dialogue. Okay, I already talked about why I don't really like that one, but if it works for you, then hey, great. E is for elsewhere. Just another way of saying everywhere. And then G is for go for it. Okay, so this is our ground airspace, and we're going to talk about why you can just go for it in G airspace here shortly. But I just thought to include this in case you guys wanted a little bit extra options here to help you memorize this for your test. Let's go ahead and review airspace. We're actually going to start with the ground because that's the easiest way to think about this stuff. So within this airspace, this black line down here at the very base, that is the ground, okay? And then you could have hills and mountains and buildings and trees and all the things within this area. And this area is going to consume up to 1,200 feet AGL, okay? And that's important. We are saying AGL, not MSL. And why is that? Well, we're talking about airspace G, airspace ground, the ground airspace, right? So we're going to be talking ground, above ground level. So you could be in California on the beach, on the coast, right next to the sea, and you are at 0 feet MSL, and you're also at 0 feet AGL. You fly up 10 feet, you're at 10 feet AGL and 10 feet MSL. However, we go to Utah, where I live, and we're sitting at about 4,500 feet MSL, just being on the ground next to Utah Lake, which is close to point of the mountain. That's why we have to have these differentiators between ground level and mean sea level. And that helps, especially once you're up in the air, to have something that we're talking about that makes sense to everybody. Okay, so right now we're just gonna say that we are in Class G airspace. All right, so here's our Class G airspace, okay? Now, when we go above 1,200 feet AGL, we move into our Class E airspace. Okay, so all of this in this light blue color, this is now our Class E airspace. There we go, Class E airspace, okay? Now, Class E airspace begins at the ceiling of Class G airspace, okay? So the floor of Class E is the ceiling of Class G, all right? So this is where it starts. But once we move up into Class E, we're moving into a controlled airspace, okay? And that's an important thing for you guys to know. Class G airspace is not controlled, all right? That doesn't mean the FAA doesn't have any jurisdiction there. It means there's no air traffic control tower you have to talk to. You're not going to be getting on a radio talking to other aircraft flying through the area, coordinating anything with them. It is uncontrolled, okay? Doesn't mean there's no jurisdiction. It means there's no air traffic control tower controlling it, okay? Class E airspace is going to be different. So this is going to go Class E airspace all the way up to 17,999 feet above sea level, above mean sea level, okay? So this, everything in here right now where we're at is Class E and G airspace. What do you think this is up here above everything else? Well, you should know that that is our Class A airspace. Class A airspace is above everything else, right? So Class E is everywhere else. Everywhere you don't have Class A, everywhere you don't have Class G, okay? So this is how I want you guys to think about it right now. It's like taking off. We start at the ground and we work our way up, okay? So you're gonna move up from G to E to A, okay? And A is going to start at 18,000 feet above mean sea level. So, and then it just goes all the way up above that, okay? Up into the stratosphere. Like it's all Class A above Class E. Everything is Class A. This is where we're never gonna fly, okay? Well, you know, air quotes here, hypothetically. There are, of course, pilots that do it, and it's not legal, so it's not recommended, and I would say don't do that, because the FAA says don't do that. So so stay at 17,999 or below, and you're good to go, all right? This is all up in Class airspace. Even if you got up there, it's gonna be extremely cold. You're gonna have a whole lot less oxygen, and you risk getting hit by a commercial jetliner or at a minimum, you know, the wake and the rotor of them flying past you, the military, you know, coming up to get you, shoot you down, you know, things like that. So horrible idea. Don't be up there, okay? Fly up to 17,999, just don't go 1 foot higher. All right, well, now it is time to talk about airports and add the airport airspace within here as well. So I'm going to slide this over here so we can make some room to put these airports in here. What we're first going to do is we're going to do our Class B, C, and D airports. First, we'll start with B, which is going to have 3 layers. Now, some people will talk about a Class B airport as a upside down wedding cake, a 3-tiered wedding cake. I don't really like talking about it that way because some wedding cakes are 2-tiered. And so it may not make sense to say that you have, you might get confused if you have a 2 or 3-tiered cake, but it does look like an upside down 3-tiered cake, all right? So this is going to be our Class B. Before I start labeling things, I'm first going to draw the other airports as well. So a Class C is also like it's a smaller wedding cake if you had a two-tiered wedding cake. Okay, so now we've got three different airport looking structures here. These are the air spaces within airports. Okay, so now we've got them designated. So this is Class B. This is another reason I like to just call it big, because BIG, it's 3 tiers, okay? 3 layers. And so that's one of the reasons I like to say BIG for big airports, okay? Class B, Class Bravo airports are big. Class C are your congested airports. They're still quite large. They have a larger airspace than Class D has, but they're not as big and they don't have the 3 layers that a Class B airspace does. And then we have Class D, okay, which is just a 1 tier, 1 layer. It's like a big, if we could see this more like 3D, it'd be like a big cylinder. Think of almost like a toilet paper roll or a paper towel roll. This is going to be a circular area around. All of these are going to be circular. So, you know, if we drew them from the top down, they would be big circles. And we will take another view here in a little bit. So just stay with me on this and follow the concepts as I go along, because I think that this is the best way that it makes sense to show all the airspace and the airports, okay? So before I start going into the next steps, I want to just pause here for a moment and talk about controlled and uncontrolled airspace again. Now, as I already mentioned, Class A and Class E are controlled airspaces. Class G is an uncontrolled airspace, okay? There's no air traffic control tower that is requiring any sort of radio communication when you're in Class G airspace, okay? So Class G is the only uncontrolled airspace that exists. Everything else is going to be controlled. So our airports, Class B, Class C, and Class D are going to be controlled airspaces, all right? So A, B, C, D, E are all controlled airspace, and Class G is uncontrolled. You need to know that, okay? Now, if we pretend for a second that my mouse, the arrow here on the mouse, is you flying your hang glider, paraglider, sailplane, ultralight, whatever piece of equipment that you're flying, when you're flying according to FAR 103, this is kind of what you're going to need to know. So if you're the little mouse arrow and you're flying up here in Class E airspace, you're in controlled airspace, and you're fine all the way up here at 17,999 feet. But let's say you need to start working on your landing and coming back to the ground, okay? Now, you could pass through all of this Class E airspace, this everywhere else airspace, okay? Elsewhere, everywhere else, everywhere. Everywhere there's not Class A, B, C, D, or G. And you're coming down, and you come right through here in this little area, you're good to go. And now you're under the big old B and next to the I, you're good to go. And you come down here, hypothetically, right? You keep coming down here, you're good to go. You come in to now you're in Class G airspace, and you're under the big old B and the big old I, and you're next to the G, you're good to go. And if you come right down here next to it and land right there on the ground, perfect. You just did everything right. That was okay. Now, if you're here and you're going to take off, and you take off, and you get all the way up through here, and you go through here, and you don't go into that C airspace, you're fine. You're good to go. You can fly around up here and do whatever you want to do, right? You can't go up here. That's bad. So you stay up here, you fly around. Now, if you want to come down and you could land right between C and D airspace, come down to the ground, you're good to go. All right, you could fly under the second tier or the top tier of the Class C airport airspace, and next to it here. Now, I wouldn't suggest it, right? There could still be airplanes and rotor and turbulence and wake and all the things messing you up, but you can fly here, right? You come up, hypothetically, you could totally do this. Fly over it and then back down and then around here. This is all okay. You're not getting into the controlled airspace. You could fly over the Class D airport airspace there like that, as long as you're not going into it, as long as you're not going into Class C, as long as you're not going into Class B. You can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. You'd have to have permission from the air traffic controller that is controlling that airspace on the radio to be able to do that, okay? So you can stay in G, you can stay in E, you can't go into A without prior authorization and permission and all that. Now, you could go into B, C, or D if you also had prior authorization. But since we don't have transponders, since we're not instrument flight rated, since we don't have, you know, all of those radios and things like that to talk to traffic control, you'd have to kind of like call in and get pre-authorization, permission to do that. All right, it's possible, but it's going to be extremely rare. Okay, so just pretty much look at it like you're not going to fly in Class A, B, C, or D. Okay, you're going to fly in G and E. That is where we live in free flight. Okay, for the most part, this is where we live. If it's brown, if it's blue, this is where you can fly. Okay, so I just wanted to make that distinction before we go on and look at the next little part that I need to teach you about these airports, airspace for the airports, okay? All right, well now we are gonna go to a website called SkyVector. I have it right here, but I want you to see the website. So you're just gonna go to skyvector.com, okay? So go into your browser of choice. And when you get into SkyVector, you have all these different options here. There's a lot to this, okay? What you're looking at here in the middle, it looks like a map, right? It looks like a paper map with some information on the left side of it, because that's exactly what it is, all right? And I wanted to show you this view so that you know if you're ever like really zoomed in, you can zoom out to see this info here on the side. And that's important. We want to take a look at that because it's sort of like, you know, any map where you want to find the chart, the legend, the compass, orientating you to what it is, giving you the information that you're going to see on here, because SkyVector is very busy. It's busy in the way that there is so much labeling on here that it can be overwhelming and confusing if you have not come from the world of aviation, airplanes, airports, all of that kind of stuff. And me, myself, and I have really no background or experience other than being a passenger of Delta, Southwest, and United. I have flown on many airlines throughout my life, but I am not an expert in any of this kind of stuff. So this is mostly watching other people's videos and picking up information from there. Okay, so I live in Utah, as you know, if you've watched my channel at all. And so here we have the Salt Lake City legend on this map, because this sectional chart, all the map stuff over here, is going to be for the Salt Lake City area. Now, if I was looking at San Francisco, this would be the San Francisco legend. If I was like flying over in the East Coast, like, I don't know, Washington, D.C., New York, Orlando, Miami, you're gonna have different information there. Some of this will be the same. Some of this will be different. Try to zoom in one more time. Okay. Now, some of the things that we're going to be looking at today, you're going to see little boxes like this where it has this 40 in here, okay? And you can see right here it's talking about Class D airspace, all right? Up here we have Class B airspace, looks like a solid blue line. Class C airspace is this magenta colored, solid magenta colored line. Class D airspace is showing these dashed blue lines. Now remember, on that little chart that I made that I started this whole airspace lecture on, I said that one way that I like to remember Class D airports is they are a dashed blue line. And so here it is right here, okay? Now, then we get into Class E airspace and some of these other colors. And so when we run into those, like over here, and we want to know what these things are, we come look at the legend, okay? So here you see this kind of sort of solid, but sort of transparent magenta line going around here. And that, when we look at it, it says Class G. Now, what is G? That's our ground airspace, right? So here it's telling us in the legend that Class E airspace with floor 700 feet above surface that laterally abuts Class G airspace. Okay, so everything within this little area is telling us that is something that we have to pay attention to in that area, and the legend's going to tell us what that thing is. Okay, now there's a whole lot of other information in here. You've got airports designated by hard surfaced runways and all of this kind of stuff. Some of this will be relevant to you, some of it will not. Now for the Hang 2 test, most of this is not really relevant to you, but for you as a free flight pilot, this is relevant to you. And again, especially if you are going to be getting into cross-country flying someday, you're going to want to understand how to get to SkyVector and what you're going to do on it, because you don't want to plot a cross-country flight that goes right through a Class B airspace, right? You don't want to fly through a Class C or D airport's airspace, and you don't want to get yourself in trouble, right? So that's why these things do matter. Okay, so you can just see that there's a lot of really great information on here, and now you know how to find that on your sectional chart. Okay, this sectional chart that we're looking at over here on the right side of the screen is what is got these hashed diagonal lines through it here. So this whole area is what this whole map is going to be looking at. Okay, so we can see again, I zoomed out. Now let's zoom back in a little bit. Okay, now here we have the Great Salt Lake in Utah, right? It's what Salt Lake City's named after, the Great Salt Lake. If I zoom in a little bit here, we start to find all of these circles, and we want to know what those are, right? You see this one here, it's got this 9-9. This one has this 10-1 and this 9-5 right here next to it. There's this one here, and then there's this one here kind of over the airport area. We see them on the left side here. These are not designators of airports. These are, I don't really know what they're called. Let's just call it like a compass. Maybe compass rose, compass, I'm not sure. But what these are helping pilots do is just kind of orient the angle that they're flying through a certain area, and it's going to give them a chart or a path kind of commonly used through there. Okay, I don't have a perfect way of explaining that. It's not fully wrapped around my brain, but these, what I want to tell you is that these are not airports. Okay, they're like little compasses that do serve a purpose for aircraft flying like from a point A to point B sort of thing through that area. Okay, so you don't really have to worry about those. I'm telling you about them because I don't want you to pay too much attention to them or get confused in other areas, because they are right here as well, where we're trying to look at the airspace around an airport. Okay, so that's why I showed you all of that. All right, everyone. So what I want to do now is actually dive into the actual airports themselves. So wherever you live, one thing that you can do if you want to research the airports in your area is just click up here where it says airports in the top left corner. Okay, and you can either find it on the list, or you can type something in. So like if we wanted to look at Salt Lake City, I could type in Salt Lake City and then search it that way. Or if you know the way that the airport is always designated, like Salt Lake City would be SLC, you can just search, and it's going to bring up a whole lot of information about that airport. Okay, so I do not want to deep dive into all of this, but you can on your own if you'd like. You can see there is a ton of information in here. Okay, but if we want to go back to the chart now, right here where it shows the map on the left side where my mouse is, we can just click that and it brings us to Salt Lake City International Airport. Okay, so I wanted to show you that so you kind of learn how to search through SkyVector on your own. But I don't want to start with Salt Lake City because that's a Class B airport. I want to start with a smaller airport. Okay, so and then we're going to work our way up. All right, so if I go over here to Provo. You may have heard of Provo. This is where Brigham Young University is, mostly known as BYU, the BYU Cougars. They play right here. You can see BYU Stadium right here in Provo, okay? And then right here, the blue runway area, this is Provo. Now, you can see that when I hover my mouse over that little green dot, it brings up some info, okay? So this is gonna be like information of the radio frequencies. You can contact the tower and things like that. So there's some information there. And I want you to notice that the runway is blue, okay? This is a blue runway. Now, if we look just a little bit down here, we see Spanish Fork Muni or Municipal, also called Woodhouse Field, SPK, all right? This is for this airport here, which is Spanish Fork. Spanish Fork is just a city south of Provo, and they have an airport here. Now notice that this runway is not blue like Provo is, okay? So you're gonna find a lot of airports like this. In fact, if I had to guess, and this is a guess, I would say that most airports in the United States are this like maroon kind of color, okay? And what that is designating is that this is a non-controlled or non-towered airport, okay? So there's no ATC, no air traffic control tower, all right? So when you're flying into an airport like this, you know, flying whatever your private airplane is, you have to get on the radio and you have to just notify other pilots in the area that you're going to be taking off or landing, right? So you're not talking to a control tower, but you still have a responsibility to notify other aircraft in the area that you're, you know, what your intentions are on the runway, okay? So this maroon color means it is not controlled. Now, it's not classified as a Bravo, Charlie, or Delta airport, okay? It's an airport that is literally within the ground airspace, Class G airspace, okay? And so it's much smaller, and you will see a ton of these. In fact, if I just scroll right over here, we've got another one right here, okay? This is Heber City, and this is a non-controlled airport. All right. Now around it, you notice this magenta colored vignette. All right. What that is signifying that everything inside of the vignette is ground airspace. It's Gulf or Class G airspace with a ceiling of 700 feet. So at 700 feet AGL, you are now in Class E airspace above 700 feet AGL. When you drop below 700 feet, you are in Class G airspace around this airport, okay? I hope that makes sense for everybody. So there are times, as we've said earlier, where the ground does not go up to 1,200 feet AGL. It only goes up to 700 feet. This is one of those instances. So anytime that you see this translucent on the inside and more solid on the outside magenta vignette, that means that the ground level only goes up to 700 feet, okay? And then it goes into Class E airspace. So that's an important designator to watch out for. Okay, so we talked about Heber, we talked about Spanish Fork. Now we're gonna go up into Class D airports, all right, like Provo. Provo's a Class D airport. It has a control tower, all right? So it is controlled. Now I'm gonna zoom in a little bit more. You see these two circles around Provo, all right? This outer circle with the sort of big tick marks, it's got a big one, little one, big one, little one. You see all that? That is those little things I was calling a compass or compass rose. And it's not the correct terminology, but I mostly understand kind of what they're for. And that is not a designator having anything to do with the airport. They're placed, if you look in the middle, you'll see like this little dot here in the middle of this one. It means there's just think of like a cell tower, a satellite tower, a radio tower, okay? And it helps communicate with the aircraft, okay? So that's kind of really what that's all about. So this does not designate an airport. This one here with all of just these dashed blue lines, that is our designating line for Provo Airport, okay? And because it's a dashed blue line, it represents a Class D airport, okay? D Delta dashed. That's going to be helpful for you to know that a Class D airport has a dashed blue line, okay? So Provo is a Class D airport. Now, right here, I showed you on the legend just a few minutes back in the video that you'll see these boxes for a Class D airport. You'll see these little boxes that are only like boxed around the corners, and they have these numbers in them. Now, anytime that we're looking at airports, whether they're Class Delta or Charlie or Bravo, they will have numbers somewhere near the outer line limits that they have. Now remember, this is a Class D, so it's just one circle. It's like a cone, right? It's like that toilet paper roll or paper towel roll, okay? It's one cylinder, and that cylinder just goes straight up, okay? A Class C will have a second circle somewhere around it, and a Class B will have a third circle somewhere around it. But for a Class D, we're just going to have one cylinder, all right? And anytime, whether it's Class B, C, or D, it'll give you these numbers. And imagine that on the tail end of those two numbers, there's two more zeros, okay? And what that's designating is the altitude. So this doesn't mean 70 feet, doesn't mean 700 feet. It means 7,000 feet. Okay, so this Class D airspace around this Class D airport extends from the surface up to 7,000 feet. Okay, so if I'm in my hang glider over here at this Provo Peak where my mouse is circling, Provo Peak, I've hiked up there, it's pretty cool. If I was to take my hang glider up there and fly off, and I started flying west, and I wanted to go over this Utah lake and over this airport, I could do that as long as my altitude is above 7,000 feet. Okay, I could fly over this. Now, if I get into 6,999 feet, I am wrong, and I have gotten myself in trouble because I have entered Class D airspace without authorization or permission. Okay? So anytime you see this, a number by itself, that means from the surface up to 7,000 feet, okay? So again, going back down to smaller airports, the magenta, these are uncontrolled, and they're usually going to be outlined by a vignette, a magenta vignette, that is showing you that the ground level goes up to 700 feet, and then you're in Class E airspace. Now, sometimes you will have airports close like this where this airport is just outside the Class D, but now you have to pay attention to this vignette to say, well, right here above the airport, as long as I'm above 700 feet, right, then I'm in that Class E airspace. I drop below 700 feet, I'm in Class G airspace. But if I go right over here, well, now I'm in Class D airspace up to 7,000 feet, okay? So hopefully that helps. Now, let's go take a look. Let's just use this again so you guys can get familiar with this. Let's go look at a Class C airport. So I know that Boise, Idaho is a Class C. So we're going to click on Boise, okay, and then go to the map. And Boise, Idaho is just a little bit north of Salt Lake. So here we have Boise, okay? Notice again, the runway is blue. It's blue because why? Because it has an air traffic control tower, right? Okay, so the numbers for designating the altitude around the airspace of a Class C and a Class B airport are going to look a little bit different than the Class D. The Class D had that box where you only see the corners of the box, right? And then it has the two numbers, like Provo had 7D for 7,000 feet. When we get into Class C and Class B airports, now the numbers look like this. They will designate a higher elevation and a lower elevation, okay? SFC, take a guess at what that stands for. 3, 2, 1, it stands for surface, okay? So within the middle cylinder or the middle cone or the middle area of the two circles around the Class C, the first one extends all the way up to, take a guess at what 6'9" designates for altitude. That's right, 6,900 feet. So just imagine two more zeros after these numbers, okay? So from the surface, everything here at the surface, up to 6,900 feet is in the Class C airspace surrounding the airport. That means that the ground level here, you cannot fly in as Class G, okay? So Class C, it trumps the Class G airspace, okay? It has priority over it. So you cannot fly up to 700 feet or up to 1,200 feet within this cylinder, okay? This is Class C. Now, you see the magenta circle in the middle, and then on the outside, you've got this big one, if you're following my mouse. Around here, there's a second one, and you see the numbers here, 69/42. All right, so guess what that means for your altitude? The top number means 6,900 feet. Okay, that's the ceiling of this area. And 42 is 4,200 feet or 4,200 feet. Okay, so that means if we're down on the ground in this area, not the middle cylinder, but this outer tier of that cake, okay, if we're under 4,200 feet, then we are in Class E airspace, okay? Down to 700 feet, and then you're at your ground level, right? Because see the big magenta vignette going around it? So that means everything within this, the ground level, has a ceiling of 700 feet, and then it goes into Class E airspace up to 4,200 feet, and then you're in Class C airspace up to 6,900 feet, and then when you're above that, you're back into Class E airspace until you get up to 17,999, right? You go 1 foot higher, you hit that 18,000, then you're in Class A, okay? So it can get a little confusing, especially when you're first learning this, all right, that there are multiple layers, which is why it's probably best, especially as a newer pilot, and until you really have this wrapped around your brain, just avoid it all. Just stay away, okay? Now, you will see this says 69/42, this says 69/42. However, within this little area, it says 69/52, and within this area, it says 69/46, okay? So this all has to do with the approach in and out of the airport. It has to do with the terrain, like mountains and hills, trees, buildings, cities, whatever it is around the airport. Going back to when we were first drawing Class B, C, and D airports in that sort of 1D drawing from the side view, you would think, oh, this is cool. They're like wedding cakes or cylinders. Well, yes and no. They're not always perfectly round cylinders. Sometimes they're weird, like Boise here. And so in this area, the floor is at 4,600 feet, right? And then here it's 4,200 feet, and here it's 5,200 feet. And then they all top out at 6,900 feet. So above that 6,900, you go into the Class E airspace. until you hit 18,000, and then you're in Class A, okay? And of course, because the vignette is around all of this, the ground, the Class G airspace, or the ground, where it's maxed out at 700 feet, and then you have Class E until you hit your 46 or your 52, okay? All right, now let's go take a look at a Class B airport. All right, so we're gonna leave Boise now, and let's just go check out somewhere else for fun. Let's go look at Phoenix, Arizona, Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. Okay, here's Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. We're gonna click on that map, and let's zoom out a little bit. So this is pretty busy, right? And it's a Class B, so it's big, B-I-G, 3 tiers, busy, okay? And an interesting thing about this is we actually kind of see more than 3 tiers, all right? There are multiple ones in here, so that makes it kind of fun to look at. You can even see right here, Phoenix Class B airspace, okay? Now, when we're looking at this one, it's easy to think of it as 3-tiered, all right? It definitely has a lot of different layers in here, and that can certainly happen, and probably actually usually does happen at every Class B airport due to terrain, due to other airports in the area, military bases, all kinds of things. So that's gonna depend on wherever you're at. Again, we have those little compasses with all the little tick marks in them, right? There's another one there. You see a Class D airport right here, Chandler, okay? Says it's a weather station, but we also know there's a runway in there, and it's got the dashed blue lines around it. And one other interesting thing real quick I just want to call out, because I think there is some stuff about this on the Hang 2 test, but if you see this red circle, this is what's called a TFR, all right? A temporary flight restriction. When I highlight over it, you see that little box that says TFR. And if you're on SkyVector, I mean, you want to look at this, especially if you're doing cross-country flights, but even for a flight park, there could be like Lookout Mountain Flight Park or Big Sky or Crestline, Andy Jackson, anywhere that you're flying, there could be a TFR for all kinds of reasons, all right? But when you go to SkyVector, and you should, before you go fly, find the TFRs, and if you hover over it, it tells you what it is. So this one has an air show, okay? And it's telling you that it's effective March 20th. You see the 3:20, it says effective 3:20 at 16:30 Zulu. So it's military time according to Zulu time. So you might have to backtrack and then convert that. Just Google it. If you don't know how to deal with military time or Zulu time, you can easily Google that for the conversion. But this is March 20th, and the making of this video is 2026. So this is saying that there's a TFR effective from March 20th, 2026 at 16:30 hours Zulu for 2 days. And it ends on March 22nd at 22:15 Zulu. Okay, so anywhere within this area, you are literally not allowed to fly at all temporarily. It's a temporary flight restriction, okay? You see right below it, there's a Goodyear Municipal, so another airport. Guess what class that is? Guess what class that is? We'll zoom in. Look at that, dashed blue line. That's a Delta airspace. Okay, so now here we're looking at Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport, which is Class B airspace. Okay, there we can hover over it, Phoenix Sky Harbor. I have flown in and out of Phoenix Sky Harbor many times in my life. And then around it, what you see and what you will see around Class B airports is solid blue lines, okay? So B and D have blue lines. B has solid lines, and D or Delta has dashed lines, okay? So B is solid blue, D is dashed blue, and then around our Class C is that solid magenta color, all right? Now, speaking of magenta, around this whole big area, we've got that, that magenta vignette. So that means the ground level, everything inside of this ground airspace, the ceiling of the ground airspace is 700 feet, and then you go into class E unless you're in the class B, okay? So the three-tiered wedding cake is not always three-tiered. Sometimes it's multiple-tiered, and this is very, very confusing, but at a very basic level for a Hang 2, you now know how to read these elevation charts. If you look on every single one of these numbers, this one here, 90-70, 90-60, 90-50, 90-30, right? The top number is always 90, 90-50, 90 surface, 90-60, all right? That means if you think about this, the very, very, very top cylinder of this entire Class B airspace is at what? Take a guess. That's right, 9,000 feet above mean sea level. Okay, so anytime we're talking about these, we're talking about MSL. Okay, we're not talking AGL because we're not talking Class G airspace anymore. All right, all the other airspaces, A, B, C, D, and E, are always in MSL. Okay, so you know that the very top cylinder is at 9,000 feet, and then the floor of each of these little sections. This one is 7,000, this one is 6,000, 5,000, 3,000. So you see the closer you get to the airport, the closer you get to the surface and those smaller cylinders within the overall larger cylinder, okay? So within here, there is no ground level. There is no Class G airspace in this entire area. The surface or the ground all the way up to 9,000 feet is Class B airspace, okay? If you're in this little area, however, if you're flying right around here where it says substation, okay, we'll zoom in a little bit. If you're flying in here, you can fly from the ground, the surface, up to 700 feet, and you're in the ground level, right? You're in Class G airspace. But you hit 3,000 feet, you're in that Class B. So between 700 feet AGL and 3,000 feet MSL, you will be in Class E airspace, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. I believe we have hit this hard enough now, definitely gone into some high detail for Hang 2. It's all good information, and I'm trying to reinforce these concepts into your mind so that you have no confusion on the airports and airspace questions on the Hang 2 test, because there are questions about it. I promise you that, and it's not really covered in the book. So hopefully this review has helped you. And now let's go back and answer our original question. All right, and we're back to question 47. All right, so it says again, in many parts of the United States, especially east of the Mississippi River, hang gliding and paragliding above 1,200 feet AGL is in FAA controlled airspace. Okay, so think about your answer. How would you answer this on the Hang 2 written test? And then pause it if you need to. You shouldn't need to. And then come back for the answer. And welcome back. Okay, so what happens above 1,200 feet AGL? We go into Class E airspace, which is controlled or uncontrolled. That's right, it's controlled. So the answer is true, okay? If you're above 1,200 feet AGL, you're gonna be in Class E airspace unless there's a B, C, or D that takes precedence over that Class E airspace, okay? So 47 is A, true. Now, just to add on to this a little bit, this answer, whether you're east or west of the Mississippi River, really doesn't matter, truthfully, because above 1,200 feet AGL, you're gonna be in Class E airspace, which is controlled airspace, okay? But one thing to think about, and the reason they're kind of wording it this way, is east of the Mississippi River, there is a much higher population of people in the United States east of the Mississippi, all right? Once you go west of the Mississippi River, there is a lot of farmland, Native American reservations, a lot of desert, a lot of wide open space that doesn't have a lot of cities and therefore doesn't have a lot of airports. And so things are much, much busier on the east side of the Mississippi River, all right? Okay, let's go on to question number 48. All right, question number 48 says, in which of the following airspaces would you not need prior authorization from an FAA controlling agency to fly in? And you're going to choose more than one answer, okay? So the options are class A, B, C, D, E, or G airspace, all right? So which one do you not need authorization from a control tower to fly in? And we definitely hit this really hard just now, so you guys should get this. But if you need a second, go ahead and pause the video and then come back for the answer. And welcome back. All right, so the answer to question number 48 is E and F, options E and F, which is our airspace class E and G, okay? Remember, class G and E is where we live in the free flight world, okay? Now, if we go to FAR 103, we can actually see the answer to this is listed in FAR 103 as well, 103.17, operations in certain airspace. So we'll just read that real quick. It says, no person may operate an ultralight vehicle within class A, B, C, or D airspace, or within the lateral boundaries of the surface area of Class E airspace designated for an airport unless that person has prior authorization from the air traffic control facility having jurisdiction over that airspace. Okay, so in addition to the review that we just deep dived on here on Gone Gliding, this is in FAR 103.17. All right, let's go see what 49 is all about. All right, question 49. Question 49 says, Class D controlled airspace surrounding a Class D airport that has a tower will be shown on an aeronautical chart as A, several thick blue solid concentric circles with a vertical limit given in hundreds of feet MSL associated with a thin solid magenta circle, mode C transponder veil, usually 60 nautical miles in diameter. Option B, two thick magenta solid concentric circles with a vertical limit given in hundreds of feet MSL, usually 20 nautical miles in diameter. Option C, a magenta dashed circle with a vertical limit at overlying controlled airspace, usually 10 nautical miles in diameter. Or option D, a blue dashed circle with a normal upper limit of 2,500 feet AGL, usually 10 nautical miles in diameter. All right, you should know this one as well, but if you need time to think about it, pause the video and then rejoin for the answer. And welcome back. Okay, so the answer to 49 is D, right? It's that blue dashed circle. That's why I like to say that Class D is a dashed blue circle. Option A here, that thick blue solid circle, that would be a Class B. Option C has a magenta dashed circle. That doesn't really even exist for airport airspace. And then option B had two thick magenta solid concentric circles. So that would be our Class C airports, okay? Also, the other options say MSL, but a Class D airport is talking about an normally, not always, but normally an upper limit of 2,500 feet AGL. Okay, now don't confuse that with what we saw in those little boxes that have just the little square corner brackets around them. Like I think for Provo, we said, 7,000 feet? That goes up to 7,000 feet MSL. So keep in mind, like I said, Utah here at Provo's about 4,500 feet MSL at the ground, at the surface. So if we go 2,500 feet above that, we're at 7,000 feet MSL. Okay, so they usually go about 2,500 feet above ground limit, not always. So don't try to commit that to memory that it's not always, but most of the time that's normally what it is. All right, so good job. Option D is the answer to 49. All right, we're on question number 50. Question number 50 says, per FAR Part 103, what are the minimum visibility and cloud clearance requirements while flying in Class E controlled airspace below 10,000 feet MSL? Okay, our options are A, 1 statute mile visibility and remaining clear of clouds. Option B, 3 statute miles visibility and remaining clear of clouds. Option C is 3 statute miles visibility and remaining 50 feet below, 100 feet above, and 200 feet to the side of any clouds. And option D is 3 statute miles visibility and remain 500 feet below, 1,000 feet above, and 2,000 feet to the side of any clouds, okay? Now, like I said, you need to make sure that you're familiar with all of FAR 103. Instead of just starting with the answer, let's go take a look at FAR 103, and we want to find the section relating to our clouds and visibility. All right, so here we are now in FAR 103, the very last section of FAR 103. So if you go find it on your own on the website I referred you to earlier, scroll down until you find 103.23, flight visibility and cloud clearance requirements, okay? This is the section that's going to give us the answer here. So it starts by saying that no person may operate an ultralight vehicle when the flight visibility or distance from clouds is less than that found in the table below. All operations in Class A, B, C, and D airspace or Class E airspace designated for an airport must receive prior air traffic control authorization as required in 103.17 of this part, okay? So maybe that makes sense to you. Maybe it's a little bit confusing. You guys are going to be okay. You don't have to super deep dive on this, but understanding your cloud clearance requirements is important, not only for the Hang 2 test, but for real life flying, okay? So let's check this out. It shows us in the columns here, airspace, flight visibility, and distance from clouds, okay? Now, for the answer to this one, we only care about Class E airspace, so I'm not going to waste a lot of time going through all the others, but make sure that you're familiar with them, okay? Now, Class E airspace, it said in our question, less than 10,000 feet MSL. So it says it right here. Class E airspace less than 10,000 feet MSL, your flight visibility has to be 3 statute miles, okay? That means that wherever you're at, if you're under 10,000 feet MSL in Class E airspace, you need to be able to see 3 miles. Okay, like all around you, all right? And then as far as distance from clouds, this is the requirements. 500 feet below the clouds, 1,000 feet above the clouds, and 2,000 feet horizontal or to the side of the clouds, okay? Those are your requirements for flying in Class C if you're under 10,000 feet. Now, if you're over 10,000 feet, those requirements get bigger. It bumps up to 5 statute miles, and then you can see the distance from the clouds there is actually further away. So the higher you go, the further you have to be away from clouds. Remember, and probably I'll make a video about this eventually someday anyway, even though there's a lot of really great ones already on YouTube, I want to make my own, but about clouds and how they help us in free flight and how they can hurt us in free flight, okay? So part of this is safety reasons. You don't want to get so close to clouds that you experience cloud suck, right? And you get yourself into a very dangerous situation. You've probably already looked at some of those videos. There are some great ones on YouTube about some very scary stories about cloud suck. You obviously want to avoid certain types of clouds, and I'm not going to deep dive into that right now, but certain types of clouds you want to avoid because the clouds themselves are very dangerous. They can suck you up into them. It can be extremely cold. You can deal with hail and lightning and all kinds of crazy weather. But also, you can't see what's in the clouds, right? There could be airplanes, helicopters, sailplanes. There could be all other kinds of aircraft in those clouds that you can't see. You might hear them, and then it's just too late, okay? So you want to avoid it for that reason, right? So you remember that you're flying your visual flight rules. You're not instrument flight rated in your hang glider or paraglider, all right? So you're not going to know what kind of danger is in that cloud. In addition to that, if you're flying in a mountainous terrain and you're in the clouds, you could smack right into a cliff, the side of a mountain, something like that, because the cloud is actually going all the way to the ground or to the mountain, right? And so there are just so many reasons that this is important to adhere to, most especially as a new pilot. Obviously, If you're like me, you watch a lot of hang gliding videos on YouTube. I'm guilty. I do that a lot, probably too much. But there's a lot to learn, and you will see pilots flying in clouds, way too close to clouds. They're not adhering to these rules, but these are the rules, okay? Don't do something that someone else is doing, whether they have more experience or not, all right? Don't get yourself in trouble. I'm certainly never gonna tell you on my YouTube channel that you should fly in the clouds or closer to the clouds than these rules allow. You should not, okay? That is the safe answer for the test. That is the safe answer for real life. Don't do that, all right? So, okay, so going back to our options here on number 50, we can tell that our answer is option D, all right? And we found that in FAR 103.23. All right, great job. Let's move on to question number 51. All right, everyone, you guys are doing really great. This is definitely a long video. It's the longest in this series. But again, I think this is gonna be very, very helpful. So let's wrap up here soon. We're gonna hit 51. Number 51 says a temporary flight restriction, or TFR. Remember, we went over those. There were those red circles on SkyVector.com. A TFR which can be placed by the federal government, so that will be FAA doing that, right? With short notice to prohibit flight over a geographical area due to presidential visits, national security concerns, large sporting events, natural disasters, accident investigation, etc., applies only to regular aircraft and not to hang gliders, paragliders, or ultralights. Is this true or false? All right, you guys should know the answer to this one. If you need a second, think about it, pause, and rejoin for the answer. All right, welcome back. Obviously, the answer on this one is false. So letter B is the answer, and we will find the answer here in FAR 103. There's a few other places that we can find it. The CFR, remember, is Code of Federal Regulations. So CFR 91 with some subchapters will also be some reference spots to this. Now, everything in this question leads us to the answer being true, except for the statement applies only to regular aircraft. So just keep in mind that obviously if there's a TFR, that means that something could be very dangerous. We looked at that TFR near Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, and it was telling us that there's going to be an air show, right? So it could be military aircraft. It could just be some really cool, like older planes, like some old World War II, like propeller planes flying and doing some cool stuff. You guys all know what air shows are all about. So they're going to be doing crazy tricks. They're going to be doing loops. They're going to be doing spins. It is an area that you absolutely want to avoid. And then obviously, you know, the government can shut an area down for president, vice president, things like that, national security. Maybe the military has something going on. I've even seen TFRs for like 4th of July. There's fireworks going on, so they're shooting up, you know, exploding rockets and ammunition into the air. You obviously don't want to be there. So of course, this stuff applies to any free flight pilots, okay? Let's go take a look at FAR 103.19 through .20. And then if you guys want to on your own, go search the Code of Federal Regulations that are listed here. Be good for you guys to see as well. I just don't need to, I don't need to over-explain it, right? So let's go check out FAR 103 real quick. All right, so here we see 103.19 and 103.20. 103.19 says, operations in prohibited or restricted areas. No person may operate an ultralight vehicle in prohibited or restricted areas unless that person has permission from the using or controlling agency as appropriate, okay? So a restricted area would be a temporary flight restriction, right? It's restricted. And then 103.20, flight restrictions in the proximity of certain areas designated by notice to airmen. It says no person may operate an ultralight vehicle in areas designated in a notice to airmen under, and then there it lists the Code of Federal Regulations. So if you wanted to, these are hyperlinked, and you could just click on these and it'll take you to those CFRs. And then it says, unless authorized by air traffic control or a flight standards certificate of waiver or authorization issued for the demonstration or event. Now, those notice to airmen that it's mentioning, you will see if you go to SkyVector.com, sometimes you'll see a little rectangular box and it'll have an NOA, okay? NOA, that's the notice to airmen. I think it's NOA, maybe it's NTA. Anyway, you will see them and it's a little note and it's telling you about something that you should be made aware of, okay? Maybe it means you can't fly in that area. Maybe it means you can, but you should be very careful or cautious about something else going on, all right? All right, so let's go on to number 52. All right, number 52 says, when overtaking another glider in ridge lift, passing between the glider being overtaken and the ridge is, our options are A, best, because you will be able to turn inside their turn when they turn. Option B, recommended, because if he turns, you can expect him to turn away from the ridge. Can also be dangerous if they drift towards the ridge before turning to complete their turn in the lift band. Option C says best, because you'll get better lift in that area. And option D is none of the above, because passing on the ridge side is contrary to recommended practice. All right, now this one is in the book, okay? So think about how you would answer this on the Hang 2 test. Pause it if you need time, and then rejoin us for the answer. And welcome back. All right, so the answer to number 52 is B. All right, so we're gonna find our answer on page 186 of the book. So let's go take a look at page 186. And you definitely wanna make sure that you're familiar with ridge soaring rules. Most flight parks tend to have a ridge of some sort, so you can kind of fly back and forth. If you've watched my flying videos, you know that I'm flying at Point of the Mountain here in Utah. Definitely a ridge soaring location. And so it's very important to understand what are the traffic pattern rules. Now, unfortunately, there are a lot of people, mostly paragliders, that are not following the rules appropriately at Point of the Mountain, and it's very crowded and it's very dangerous. And I really wish that the Utah Hang Gliding and Paragliding Association would do something a little bit better to rectify that, but that's another story. I won't get on my soapbox. Let's check this out here. It says ridge soaring rules, okay? Because ridge soaring often involves flying in fairly heavy traffic, it's absolutely crucial to have a clear understanding of the rules that control traffic on a ridge. Always make your turns away from the ridge. That should be obvious, but when you're brand new, it might not be. So you never want to turn in towards the ridge. You're going to have a headwind coming towards the ridge, right? And if you were to turn towards the ridge, you would now be flying downwind quickly. And that could send you right into the ridge where you smack the ground and could get hurt. All kinds of bad things could happen. So always turn away from the ridge, all right? That's a safety precaution. When two gliders meet head on, both should turn to the right, but the glider with the ridge to its right must be given space, okay? So, you always turn right when you're head on, you're approaching another free flight pilot, both of you will turn to the right. So if you have the ridge towards your right, yes, you're gonna turn towards the ridge. You're not making a sharp turn towards the ridge. You're just kind of moving, shuffling over a little bit to the right to make way for the other glider who will be on your left. If you have the ridge to your left, you're turning right, you're turning away from that ridge to give that other pilot a little bit more room. So you're not like turning 90 degrees or anything, okay? You're just moving out of the way a little bit, all right? And you wanna move to the right when you're head on with another glider. Okay, so again, safety reason. And then the third bullet point, when overtaking another glider, so you're passing, right? You're passing someone that's going slower than you. So when overtaking another glider, you must pass between it and the ridge. Otherwise, it may be trapped between you and the ridge, all right? So let's just say that you've got the ridge on your right side, all right, your ridge soaring. You've got the ridge to your right, and there's a pilot in front of you who also has a ridge to their right. They're going in the exact same direction as you, and you're closing in on them. You're getting closer to them, and you're going to need to pass them, okay? You want to pass them on their right side in that scenario, okay? You do not want to pass them on their left, because if they make a turn, they're going to turn where? Away from the ridge. So if you pass them on their left and the ridge is on your right and you're starting to pass them and then they start making that left turn, that's going to be really bad, and you don't want to find yourself in that situation. Now, the opposite is if you're both flying in one direction and the ridge is towards your left, okay? The ridge is on your left side, you're both flying in the same direction and you're catching up to somebody and you're going to need to pass them. You want to pass them to the left in that scenario, okay? So if the ridge is on your right, pass on the right. If the ridge is on your left, pass on the left. So pass on the ridge side, all right? Because if they make their turn to turn 180 and fly the other way, they're going to turn away from the ridge, and you don't want to put yourself there, all right? That could be dangerous for both of you. Continuing on, it says, never make a turn without carefully checking all around you to clear the way. So clear your turns before you turn, okay? The right of way rules that control traffic on a ridge are simple but important. Because you may be flying with a number of other gliders, it's crucial that you understand what you are supposed to do. All right. So these diagrams here, A, B, C, and D, are explaining these scenarios that are in our bullet points that we just discussed. So you should have this book. Go to page 186. Make sure that you're very familiar with ridge soaring rules. That's extremely important for safety. All right, let's go on to our next question. All right, question number 53. You are soaring in ridge lift with the ridge well below you to your left. As you cruise along, you suddenly realize that you are on a head-on collision course with another glider. The pilot of this glider will expect you to A, turn toward the valley, B, drive under them, C, turn left, D, climb as high as possible to let them get by beneath you, or E, do nothing. It's up to them to stay clear. All right, think about how you'd answer this on the test. Pause it, come back for the answer. And welcome back. All right, the answer to question number 53 is A. You're going to turn towards the valley in this situation, all right? In this scenario, they're saying that the ridge is on your left, okay? And so there's some sort of valley, apparently, on your right, okay? You definitely can get rid of answer B, drive under them. You're not going to drive under them. First of all, you would fly under them, not drive. But you wouldn't fly under them. So you're not going to try to, lose a massive amount of elevation to go under somebody. That's just not the ridge soaring rules. Could you do that? Yeah, maybe, depending on the scenario. That potentially it's something you could do. Just like answer D, climb as much as possible to let them get by beneath you. It's possible, right? But that's not the ridge soaring rules. The ridge soaring rules here are essentially assuming that you're both at the exact same elevation or altitude and you're head on. It's just easier for you to follow the ridge soaring rules here. So you, with the ridge on your left, would turn right towards this valley, and that other pilot who has the ridge on their right is going to move a little bit towards the right. Remember, again, this is not like a 90-degree turn. It's slightly shifting yourself away from that other pilot to allow them room and you room to safely pass each other in opposite directions, okay? So answer C would be incorrect, because if you turn left, you've turned towards the ridge, and that's not what you want to do, because they are going to be going further towards your left. So you would be darting right towards them if you did that. And then option E, do nothing. It's up to them to stay clear. Terrible idea to just assume that the other pilot is somehow going to make a safe situation for the both of you. You both have equal responsibility, okay? The answer here is on page 186, so let's go check that out. And actually, we already did review this when we read the bullet points. And so here, I'm just showing page 186 again, but we already went over this. We hit all the bullet points. We looked at the diagrams in A, B, C, and D. So, we already know that the answer is A, turn toward the valley. So I think you guys have this, but make sure that you really review the ridge soaring rules and you understand them very clearly. If you have any questions, talk to your instructor or a safety advisor at your site or someone else so that you really have this concept burned into your brain appropriately. All right, let's go do number 54. All right, question 54 says, which of the following are some, but not all, of the requirements for getting the Hang 2 rating? Okay, so if you are already a member of USHPA, then you can sign into the website and find all the SOPs there, all right? That is where this answer is going to come from. So if you're not yet a member of USHPA, you won't be able to access the SOPs. It's in a members only section. So first, we're going to give you an opportunity to take a stab at the answer. Maybe you know it, maybe you don't. And then, after I show the answer, we will review the USHPA SOP, okay? All right, option A says demonstrate 4 straight flights with good launches and landings, no spot landing requirement. Option B says logged ground school, demonstrate airspeed changes and 90-degree and 180-degree turns, 3 landings within 100-foot spot. Option C is logged 90 flights, 30 flying days, 10 hours airtime, demonstrate linked 180-degree turns, speeds to fly for performance, gentle stalls, and 3 landings within 50-foot spot. And then our last answer in option D says logged 250 flights, 80 flying days, a 1-hour solo flight, 75 hours airtime, demonstrate reversing 360-degree turns, stalls, soaring flights with altitude gain, and 3 landings within a 25-foot spot. All right, so go ahead and choose your answer. Think about it. How would you answer this on the Hang 2 test? And remember, the answer does not come from the book, so it's not in there. And then rejoin us for the answer. And welcome back. All right, everybody, the answer to question 54 is B. To get your Hang 2 rating, you have to have logged ground school. You have to have logged ground school, which again, ask your instructor if watching these videos counts, because we review a lot of the information that they would be teaching you for ground school anyway. And this is truly going to prepare you better than anything else out there for the Hang 2 test. I can guarantee that. All right, so you have to have your logged ground school. You have to demonstrate airspeed changes and 90-degree and 180-degree turns. So you don't have to do any 360-degree turns. You have to have 3 landings within 100-foot spot. All right, so if you put a cone down on the ground somewhere at your flight school, you have to land somewhere within 100 feet of that cone. And that's very doable. All right, everybody. So here's the SOP from USHPA. You can see it is 12-02. Okay, so here's the introduction and everything else. The administration procedures. And then we get down to 12-02.03 rating requirements, okay? We go past that to get our witness tasks and launch skill requirements. And then .05 has our Hang 0 rating, all right? So that's when you are a student and you're learning, you're not rated to fly on your own. .06 is the beginner hang gliding rating, so Hang 1, all right? That means if you have your Hang 1, that means that you can fly as long as an instructor is there watching you. You cannot fly without an instructor there watching you, providing guidance and everything else. So you cannot fly on your own with a Hang 1. You can't just go to any site and fly. And then we get to section 12-02.07. Now this is for the Hang 2 rating, which is your novice hang gliding rating, okay? In paragraph B, it says required witnessed tasks. So you have your logged requirements. You have to have 8 hours of ground school, okay? So add up all the time you've been watching this series of videos and you're getting pretty close. And then you have to know some about the weather. You have to have some, understanding of launching, danger signs, landings, approaches, equipment, site orientation, all right? You have to have at least 25 training flights there, you can see, and then demonstrated skills and knowledge. If you look at paragraph F, that is where it mentions your 90 degree turns there. Paragraph G shows your 180 degree turns. You need to talk about executing a 360 degree turn. And then number 7 there, the Hang 2 accuracy radius for each landing is 100 feet. Okay, so that's the 100 foot mark area that is in the answer. So there you go. Everything is in the USHPA SOP section 12. All right, and then these other options here are looking like they are the requirements for Hang 3 in answer C and Hang 4 in answer D. Now, I'm not verifying that right now, but those are actually pretty close, so that could be accurate. But all of those are listed in the USHPA SOPs. So you will not find those answers in the book, which is why it is great that you are watching this video. All right, we got one question to go and then we're done, ladies and gentlemen. All right, question 55. Which of the following would be the most awesome thing that you could do right now? A, subscribing to Gone Gliding. B, liking this video and all of the videos on the Gone Gliding channel. C, leaving a comment on this video with valuable feedback. Or D, all of the above. All right, obviously the answer is D, all of the above. You guys should know that. I have put in a ton of time just making this 5 series of videos, okay? So all I ask is that you subscribe, like, comment, and share, all right? Thank you guys so much for watching this series of videos, and I wish you the best of luck on your Hang 2 test. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for sticking through all of these videos in this 5-part series to help you train for the Hang 2 written test administered by USHPA. I really do wish you the best of luck. I really hope these videos have been helpful for you. If you haven't subscribed, please do me that one favor. Hit the like button, leave a comment. Let me know if you found these to be good videos, helpful videos for you. Please come back and let me know if you passed or not. Very excited for you all. We had a lot to go over in this whole series, especially I feel like in this video, since we added on not only the book, but we had the FAR 103 from the FAA. We reviewed airports and airspace, both controlled and uncontrolled. We dug into SkyVector so that you could get a little bit more information there about where to find more information and how to use it. So I really hope that you guys find this helpful in your hang gliding career or journey, and hope that it is useful for you and keeps you safe. If there's anything else that you would find helpful as far as training or anything like that, drop me a comment. I do read every comment and I try to reply to them all as well. And so I want to keep making great content for this channel and for all of you. So if you have anything that you'd like to see that you yourself don't want to make, but you'd like me to maybe make for you, let me know. I'm definitely open to ideas. There is so much to do to keep pushing this sport further forward and upward and onward. And I'm happy to be doing my little part of that. Thanks again, and I will see you guys on the next video.